Hello, you beautiful people! So, I'm back already with another video after posting Tribbie's kit video, and I'm guessing you're here on this video because you're interested in Mydei and want to know the complete info on his kit and how strong of a DPS he'll be, right? Well, you might have just clicked on the perfect video to get that info. Today, we'll mainly go over Mydei's entire kit in detail, including his basic abilities, his talent, his traces, his light cone, and lastly, his eidolons. Along with all that, I'll also talk a little bit about his best in slot team, the characters who are going to perfectly synergize with this kit, and at last, we'll quickly skim through his light cone and vertical investment value as well. Before we go on though, if you're planning to pull for the Herda or the rerunning units in version 3.0, you might want to check out Lubar because on this site, you can save up to a total of 23% on all your purchases. Just as an example, I'll buy this 3280 Oniric Shard pack for $43, and this same pack costs me about $50 from the in-game shop. You can see that it's cheaper, right? The top-up process is honestly really easy as well because all you need to do is enter your UID in this box and choose your respective server depending on your account. After waiting for a few minutes, I received my Jades with the double top-up bonus because it was my first purchase and saved a decent amount of money. Also, other than HSR, you can top up on Genshin as well using Lubar, and both of these games have quite a lot of 5-star reviews. Lastly, if you use my link which is in the description or the pinned comment, you can get an extra 8% off on top of all the other discounts, so do keep that in mind. Anyways, with the sponsor done, I'm just going to mention the usual disclaimer that this particular version of Mydei's kit is the first version, and some changes will most likely be made to it in the upcoming weeks. Yep, just keep that in the back of your mind. With that being said, let's begin without wasting any more of your time or energy. Okay, as usual, starting with the very basics, Mydei is going to be an imaginary type unit who follows the path of destruction and looking at his insane multipliers. I can very confidently say that he is going to play the role of a main DPS on your team. Basically, if I have to explain his kit in a few words, Mydei is pretty much like a buffed up Blade who attacks his enemies without a weapon, because his sheer aura does it for him. Also, just like Blade, he is going to be our second DPS who purely scales on HP and obviously crit stats, while also having a ton of self-buffs and great synergy with the current roster. Lastly, regarding his release date, Mydei is going to be featured in the second half of patch 3.1, and his banner will go live on March 19th for all the different time zones. Alright, with that part or the basics being done, let's move on and take a look at his kit in detail. So, for his kit, we're actually going to start with his talent first, because that's where his main mechanic comes from. Okay, so Mydei's talent says that each time he loses HP, he gains a charge at a 100% conversion rate, and whenever this charge is full or reaches its maximum value, Mydei enters a special state which is unique to him called Vendetta. Now, while Mydei is in Vendetta state, he becomes immune to all variants of crowd control that are inflicted on him and increases his max HP by 50% of his current HP. This Vendetta state gets even more interesting as Mydei loses all his defense while he is in this state, and increases his taunt value as well. Essentially, the Vendetta state makes Mydei into a walking juggernaut who tries to eat as much damage on purpose, and this is why he has a massive total of 0 defense in this state while increases his own taunt as well. Now, as for the reason why he does this, it's because while Mydei is in this state, he gains enhanced abilities and cannot use his basic attack, and whenever his own turn starts, he will automatically use his enhanced skill. This is actually really interesting for a few reasons, with the biggest one being that he is basically an autoplay character. Yep, if someone is confused why I called him an autoplay unit, it's because, as I mentioned, you can't actually control him while he is in his Vendetta state, as he will quite literally take over all the controls and deal all the damage himself, which is pretty fitting for his character now that I think about it. That's not all for his talent though, because while Mydei is in this state, he keeps a total of all the HP that he loses, and when this total reaches around 180% of his max HP, Mydei gets even more stronger by advancing his own action and being able to enhance his skill even more than before. After this, Mydei clears his HP total, resetting it from the very start. Yep, we actually have a character who can totally take over control and can enhance his already enhanced skill even more. Anyways, moving on, before we get to his enhanced abilities, I do have to cover the usual stuff first. Honestly though, the rest of Mydei's kit is slightly less interesting as most of his mechanics and gameplay aspects are within his talent, but the rest of his kit is still fairly important, such as his basic attack. So, just like Tribbie's basic, Mydei's basic is quite unique as compared to the rest of the cast as well because his basic has a HP scaling, which only Lynx and Huohuo have. I know this isn't really relevant, but I think it's a really cool detail. His unenhanced skill is relatively normal, as it just deals imaginary damage based off his maxed HP to a single target and having blast damage, which also hits the adjacent targets as well. Honestly, the most important part of his skill is that it drains his own HP by 50%, allowing him to stack his talent and get his vendetta state faster. Finally, talking about his ultimate, it says that upon being used, it heals Mydei by a small amount and then deals blast damage based off his max HP to all the enemies present on the field. Now, other than all that, if Mydei uses his ultimate while he is in the vendetta state, this immediately increases his total HP loss tally by 30% of Mydei's max HP, getting him closer to his finisher enhanced skill. Alright, next up, taking a look at his enhanced abilities, Mydei actually has plenty of them with his enhanced skill just being a much better version of his base skill. Basically, it says that when used, it consumes a total of 35% of Mydei's current HP and deals blast damage to the enemies unfortunate enough to be on the other side of him. That's not all though, because as someone who strives to become a king, he can obviously do a little bit better than this with his double enhanced skill. Yep, I know a double enhanced skill sounds kind of insane, and it's really strong, essentially having double the scalings of his enhanced skill, and this ability deals damage based on the total amount of damage that Mydei received during his vendetta state. Basically, his double enhanced skill is kind of like his final attack, and it definitely feels like one with how much damage it will deal to the enemy. Lastly, as for his technique, it's actually pretty simple because it just creates a zone which inflicts daze upon the enemies when it is used, somewhat similar to Fugue's technique. Now, if Mydei enters a battle after using his technique, he will deal a little bit of imaginary damage to all the enemies while also taunting them for a single turn, and other than that, his technique also charges his talent up to 50%. Pretty decent technique, I would say, and helps him lose some HP in the first cycle due to that taunt inflicted on the enemies. Well, with that, we're done discussing Mydei's base kit in detail, and moving on, let's take a look at his major traces. Okay, I have to say, Mydei's traces are equally as strong as his base kit, reflecting on the insane amount of self-buffs and utility that he has. So, starting with his first trace, this trace essentially gives Mydei around 48% crit rate for simply stacking HP in his build. Yep, a 48% crit rate buff is on the same level as Jingliu's, but Mydei doesn't need to drain the HP of his teammates to attain this buff, and he simply gets this buff if you build him properly. This trace lets Mydei have an amazing crit ratio across his entire build, so hopefully you won't have too many Zila moments with him. Next up, taking a look at his second trace, this trace directly improves the rate of conversion of the HP that he loses into his tally by a huge total of 250%. Basically, this means that all the damage that he receives from the enemies charges his tally really fast, so any enemy that has constant hard-hitting attacks will make Mydei even better. Finally, his third trace truly shows how mortal Mydei is, as instead of having a one-time use self-revive like some characters do, Mydei simply revives himself whenever he loses all his HP in his vendetta state. Yep, there is no upper limit to this revive, meaning that he can continuously revive himself while he is in his vendetta state. This is actually really nice as it gives him some safety measures because due to how his kit works, Mydei is draining his own HP constantly, and he is at the risk of losing all his HP quite a lot of times, so this trace ends up being really useful. Lastly, moving on to the final part of his kit, let's take a detailed look at his light cone. So, his light cone serves two purposes as it gives him a really huge damage increase, while also providing him with some much needed utility. Firstly, his light cone increases his max HP by 18% and his incoming healing by 20%, which for an HP scaler who is constantly being attacked and manipulating his own HP is really good. This isn't all though, because along with this, whenever Mydei uses his enhanced skill or ultimate, he will consume a percentage of his max HP and increase the damage dealt by this current attack by a total of 30%. Now, other than that, if this effect's consumed HP is greater than 500, it additionally increases this current attack's damage by another 30%. This pretty much synergizes really well with Mydei's kit, which is kind of obvious considering it's his signature light cone, and literally all of his attacks will usually fulfill this requirement. And I expect this light cone to be a really nice damage increase for him. Anyways, with that, we're totally done discussing Mydei's kit in detail, and I hope you understood my explanations. Honestly, I really love his playstyle quite a lot, and I'm interested to see how this autoplay will work while he is in his Vendetta state. I'm curious though, how do you guys feel about his kit? Also, if you ended up watching until the end, you might want to consider subscribing as well. With that being said, I love y'all, and I will see you in another one.